The old woman's card beeped red for the third time, and nobody on the bus was laughing at her yet. But Naomi could feel it coming. She saw it in the way the man near the front had lowered his phone. In the way the driver's jaw had gone tight and patient in that particular way that wasn't patient at all. 6:15, the fare read a glowing fair, $2.50, like it was daring someone to argue with it. And the old woman just stood there in the aisle, swiping a worn card against a machine that wouldn't take her money. "Try it again," the driver said, in the voice of someone who had already said it twice. The woman tried it again. Her hands weren't steady, not shaking, exactly. More like they'd forgotten how to hurry. She wore a canvas coat gone soft and colorless at the elbows, and a bag hanging off one shoulder like it had been there so long it had become part of her. "I have the money," she said, mostly to herself. "I know I have the money." "Ma'am." The driver's hand hovered near the door lever. "If it's not going to go through, I'm going to need you to step off so I can keep my schedule." Somebody near the back laughed, not cruel, just careless. The kind of laugh that comes from people who've never once had to count exact change standing in front of an audience. A woman a few rows up leaned toward her friend and said something behind her hand, and they both smiled at the window like the smiling was private. "Come on, lady," someone muttered. The doors gave a soft mechanical shudder, folding halfway in, waiting on the driver's next decision. Naomi watched all of it without deciding to. She was 17, tired in the specific way that came from a Saturday shift, folding other people's sheets at the laundromat, her backpack digging a groove into one shoulder. $3 and change in the pocket of her hoodie, the exact fare for herself, and the transfer she'd need to get home. She'd counted it twice at the laundromat register before she left, because there wasn't a version of her life anymore where money arrived without being counted first. The old woman's mouth opened, like she wanted to explain herself to a bus full of strangers, who had already decided they didn't need an explanation. What caught Naomi wasn't the fumbling or the beeping machine. It was that the woman wasn't looking for help. She was trying to disappear, and the doors were closing on her while she did it. Naomi stood up before she'd fully decided to. "I've got it," she said, and stepped forward with her hand already in her pocket. The old woman turned. Up close, her eyes were pale and sharp in a way that didn't match the rest of her, not confused, not helpless. Watching. "No," she said. "No, sweetheart, I couldn't. It's $2.50. Naomi was already feeding the bills into the reader. "It's not a big deal." The machine beeped green. Fare accepted. The doors settled back open, the tension in them gone slack, and the driver's shoulders dropped an inch like he'd been the one holding his breath. Before we see what this simple act of kindness leads to, take a quick second to help us out. If you enjoy powerful stories about compassion, unexpected twists, and people who choose kindness when it matters most, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We read your comments, and your support helps us bring you more unforgettable stories every week. Now, let's get back to Naomi's decision, and the moment that would change her life forever. Somewhere behind them, the man with the phone muttered something that ended in generations too soft, and his friend laughed again, and Naomi felt her ears go hot, but she didn't turn around. She'd learned a long time ago that turning around only fed it. The old woman didn't move toward a seat right away. She looked at Naomi like she was trying to solve something, not the fare. Something else, something in Naomi's face, and for a second, the noise of the bus seemed to fall back a layer, the way a room does right before somebody says the thing they've been building up to. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "I know. Most people wouldn't have." Naomi just shrugged. She went back to her seat, and the pocket of her hoodie held nothing now but a few loose coins. Enough for her own fare, nothing for the transfer. She told herself it didn't matter. People survived worse than a cold walk. She almost missed it when the old woman turned around 3 stops later, right before her own stop came up, and looked back at her with that same unsettling attention. "What's your name?" she asked. "Naomi." A pause. Not long. Just long enough that Naomi noticed it. "Naomi what?" "Bellamy." Something crossed the old woman's face, small, quick, gone before Naomi could name it. "Bellamy," the woman repeated, like she was testing whether the word would hold. The bus doors hissed open at her stop. She stood, gathered her bag, and for one more second held Naomi's eyes like there was a whole sentence behind them she'd decided not to say. Then she stepped down onto the sidewalk, and the doors closed, and the bus pulled away. The rain blurred the window until the old woman's coat was just a smudge of grey against the wet street. By the time the light changed, she was gone. The walk home took 40 minutes, and by the time Naomi reached the apartment, the cold had worked all the way into her knuckles. She let herself in quietly, out of habit more than need. The kitchen light was on. Deja was at the table in her scrubs, still creased from a 12-hour shift, a calculator and a stack of envelopes in front of her, like she was doing math she already knew the answer to and hated. "You're late," Deja said, without looking up. Bus took forever. It wasn't a lie. Exactly. It just wasn't the whole truth, and Deja had radar for the space between those two things. She'd had 4 years of practice, ever since their mother died, and the job of noticing things fell to her the way jobs fall to whoever's left standing closest. "You walked." Deja set the pen down. "Your face is doing the thing." "What thing?" "The thing where you're freezing and pretending you're not." Naomi hung her hoodie on the hook by the door and didn't answer right away. She filled a glass of water instead, stood at the sink, let the tap run longer than it needed to. Behind her, she heard Deja go back to the envelopes, the small, tired sound of paper being squared into a pile. "Rent's due Tuesday," Deja said. Not an accusation. Just a fact she was setting on the table between them, the way she set most facts these days. Carefully, like something that might spill. "I know, we're 40 short if the water bill hits before payday. We'll be okay." Naomi said it, the way she said most things now. Quiet, certain, already calculating what she'd give up to make it true. Deja studied her for a second too long, the particular look she gave when she suspected there was a piece missing from the story, and had decided, for tonight, not to go looking for it. "You always say that," she said, and it wasn't quite a compliment. She got up to put the kettle on, moving around the small kitchen with the economy of someone who'd learned to do everything without wasting a step. Turn the burner, reach the mugs, catch the cabinet before it banged shut, all while her mind was clearly somewhere else. Naomi watched her and felt the old ache that had nothing to do with rent. "You ever think about her on nights like this?" Naomi asked. She hadn't planned to ask it. It just came the way it sometimes did when the kitchen got quiet enough. Deja didn't need to ask who. Every night like this, she would have known what to do about the water bill. She would have found $40 somewhere nobody else could find it. Deja almost smiled. And then she would have given it to somebody who needed it worse. That landed somewhere Naomi wasn't ready for. She thought of the old woman on the bus, the way she'd said Bellamy like the word had weight she hadn't expected it to carry. And something small and uneasy moved in her chest, a thought she didn't have language for yet. She used to say that, Naomi said carefully, about giving away what you needed. She did more than say it. Deja's voice went thin. She did it right up until it cost her a job. Cost her. She stopped. Set 2 mugs down harder than she meant to. "Never mind." "It's late. Deja. It's late, Naomi. Not sharp. Just closed. The way a door closes when someone's decided the room behind it isn't safe to walk through tonight." Naomi let it go. She'd learned, the hard way, which doors in her sister stayed shut until Deja opened them herself. She took her tea, said goodnight, and lay in bed a long time afterward, turning over the shape of things she didn't understand, her mother's last job, whatever had gone wrong there, the reason Deja's face changed whenever it came up. It had always felt like an old wound. Tonight, for the first time, it felt like it might still be bleeding somewhere out of sight. She fell asleep before she meant to, and woke to daylight already at the blinds, and the sound of her phone buzzing on the crate beside her bed. Deja, calling from the kitchen instead of walking the 10 feet to knock. "Naomi." Her sister's voice had a strange flatness to it, careful, in a way Naomi didn't like. "There's a car outside." "What kind of car?" "The kind that doesn't park on this street." Naomi got up, crossed to the window, and pulled back the blinds. A black sedan sat at the curb, engine idling, exhaust curling pale in the cold morning air. A driver stood by the passenger door, hands folded, waiting. And beside him, in a coat that looked nothing like the one from the bus, clean lines, dark wool, unmistakably expensive, stood the old woman. She was looking up at their building, straight at their window like she already knew which one it was. Naomi's stomach dropped somewhere. It hadn't dropped since the last time a stranger showed up at their door with news that changed everything. She's asking the building manager for us, Deja said quietly, phone still pressed to her ear, even though she'd walked into the doorway of Naomi's room. She used our last name. Naomi didn't move from the window. How does she know our last name? Deja asked again, softer this time. Naomi couldn't answer. Down below, the old woman looked up once more. Then she took a step toward the front door. By the time Naomi reached the front door, her sister was already there, one hand on the frame like she meant to hold the whole building shut if she had to. The old woman stood on the step below them, and up close in daylight she looked different than she had on the bus, not younger, not softer, just more exactly herself. The coat sat on her like something she'd stopped noticing years ago. Her eyes moved between the two of them, steady, searching for something in their faces the way she'd searched Naomi's the night before. I'm sorry to come without calling, she said. I didn't have a number. I only had a name. You have our name, Deja said. Not a question. How? Corinne didn't answer right away. Her gaze had drifted past them, into the narrow hallway, and caught on something. The small shelf by the coat hooks, cluttered with mail and a chipped candle, and, propped against the wall, a photograph in a plain frame. A woman in scrubs, laughing at something off camera, a nursing pin glinting small and silver on her collar. May I ask, Corinne said carefully, where that pin came from? Deja's hand didn't leave the doorframe. It was our mother's South. What was her name? You already know, Naomi said. You said it yourself last night, on the bus. Corinne's eyes stayed on the photograph a moment longer, like she was giving herself one last second before the truth became unavoidable. Then she looked up. Renata, she said. Renata Bellamy worked for me. 14 years ago. She cared for my husband at the end. She was better at it than anyone we hired before or since. The hallway went very still. She never mentioned. Naomi started. She wouldn't have, Corinne said. Not after how it ended. She raised a concern about the way our insurance division handled claims for people who did work like hers. It cost her the job. Deja's jaw had gone tight, in a way Naomi recognized, the exact shape of it, from 4 years ago, in a hospital hallway that smelled like antiseptic and bad news. She died believing nobody listened, Deja said. The words landed in the hallway like something dropped from a height. Even Corinne seemed to feel the weight of them settle before she spoke again. I know, she said. I only found out recently how it ended for her. That's not an excuse. So, what is this? Deja's voice had an edge now, controlled but sharp underneath. You show up in a car like that, and what, you write us a check and it's settled? No. Corinne said it fast enough that it landed like a correction. I'm not here to settle anything. I'm here because your sister gave a stranger her last $5, without knowing who that stranger was, and it made me ask what kind of woman I've become. That someone like your mother could disappear from my company, and I wouldn't notice for 14 years. I don't want your money, Deja said, and her voice shook on the word in a way that told Naomi she meant something bigger than money, and didn't have the language for it either. I'm not offering money first. Corinne's eyes hadn't left hers. I came 14 years too late for your mother. I'm not going to be late for you too. Nobody spoke for a moment. Somewhere down the block, a car alarm chirped and went quiet. I'd like to sit down with you both, Corinne said finally. Properly, not on a doorstep. Deja hadn't unclenched her hand from the frame, but something in her face had shifted. Not trust, not yet, but the smallest crack where trust might get in. Corinne's phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She glanced at the screen, and whatever she saw there changed her face the way Naomi's name had changed it on the bus. Fast, involuntary, gone almost before it arrived. Someone's coming, she said quietly. Who? Naomi asked. Corinne didn't answer right away. She was already turning to look down the street, toward the far corner where, faintly, another engine had begun to grow louder. The one person, she said, who doesn't want you hearing the rest of this. The car that pulled up behind Corinne's was newer, darker, and stopped at an angle that suggested whoever was driving it hadn't planned on parking so much as arriving. The man who got out wore a suit that fit like it had been considered, not chosen, and he crossed the sidewalk fast, in the manner of someone used to rooms rearranging themselves around his urgency. Grandmother. His eyes swept the doorway, cataloguing Deja, Naomi, the building, all in a glance. You could have called me. I did consider it, Corinne said. And then I remembered the last time I told you where I was going, you arrived somewhere else entirely. Something tightened in his jaw. He turned to Deja, and his voice changed completely, softer, smoother, a voice built for closing things quickly. Miss Bellamy, I'm Julian Ashworth. I understand there's been a misunderstanding regarding your mother's employment history. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Deja said. It was a woman who lost her job for telling the truth. I'd like to make sure you and your sister are taken care of. Julian reached into his jacket and produced a folder, thin, already prepared, which told Naomi he hadn't come to listen, he'd come to close a file. A settlement. Generous. Along with a standard confidentiality agreement, so this can be resolved quietly, without dragging your mother's name through. Through what? Naomi said. Julian's eyes moved to her, briefly, the way adults sometimes looked at teenagers when they hadn't expected them to speak. Through public scrutiny. Reporters. Speculation. I'd think he'd want to protect her memory, not put it on display. It was a good sentence. Naomi could feel how good it was, how carefully it wrapped a closed mouth in the language of protecting someone. Deja's hand had gone to the folder before she seemed to decide to reach for it. Naomi watched her sister's face, the exhaustion in it, the 4 years of counting coins on a kitchen table, the rent due Tuesday, and understood, with a lurch, that Deja was actually considering it. Not because she'd stopped caring what happened to their mother's name, because she was tired, in a way that made quiet sound like mercy. Deja, Naomi said. Her sister didn't look at her. We need this, Naomi. We needed it 2 years ago too, Naomi said. When she died, and nobody explained why the insurance wouldn't cover the treatment that would have saved her. Nobody offered us a folder then. That landed. Deja's hand stopped, inches from the papers. I'm not signing something that says we'll stay quiet about what happened to her, Naomi said. She was shaking, she realized, not from the cold this time. I gave a stranger everything I had on a bus, because it was the right thing to do, not because I expected anybody in a suit to show up with a check. I'm not going to sell the one thing I actually have left of her. Julian's smile had thinned by a fraction, the practiced kind of patience wearing down. This is a generous offer for a teenager to be refusing on principle. She's not a teenager refusing on principle, Corinne said. She's the reason I found out at all. The street went quiet in the particular way it does right before something shifts permanently. How many others? Corinne said, and her voice had dropped into something colder than Naomi had heard from her yet. Julian, how many other Renata Bellamys have there been? He didn't answer immediately, and the silence answered for him. I asked you a question. There have been claims disputes, he said carefully. Every large insurer has claims disputes. It doesn't mean how many, Julian. I don't have an exact number in front of me. You have an exact number somewhere, Corinne said. You've had it for years. You've kept it from me for years. That's why you drove here so fast, not because you were worried about me, because you were worried about what I'd find if I kept talking to this family instead of you. Julian's composure finally cracked, just slightly, at the edges. Grandmother, if this becomes public, it doesn't just embarrass the company, it threatens the entire insurance division. Thousands of jobs. Years of what? Corinne said. Years of deciding what a sick caregiver was worth on a spreadsheet, Corinne said, before he could finish it himself. That's what you're protecting. Say it correctly, at least. She turned to Deja, and something in her posture had changed. Not softened, exactly, but settled. The way a person settles once they've stopped weighing a decision and started living inside it. I'm calling a press conference, Corinne said. Not to protect the company. To fix what it's done. I want your mother's name attached to the correction, not buried under it, if that's something you can live with. If it isn't, I'll find another way, but I am not staying quiet about this any longer. You'll tank the division, Julian said. You understand that. The stock, Then it tanks, Corinne said, and there was no hesitation in it at all. I'd rather lose a division than spend one more year being the kind of person who lets this keep happening because it's inconvenient to stop. Deja had gone very still, the folder forgotten on the step beside her, her eyes fixed on Corinne like she was trying to decide whether to believe what she was hearing. You'd really do that? Deja said. Put it all out. publicly, even knowing what it costs. I already know what it cost your family, Corinne said. I'm done pretending the company's cost matters more. Julian looked between his grandmother and the two women in the doorway, and for a moment he seemed to understand that the morning had already moved past whatever he'd planned for. Then he bent, picked up the folder from the step, and smoothed one corner with his thumb. Slow, deliberate, a man buying himself a few seconds to rebuild something. You think the board hasn't rehearsed this conversation? He said quietly. Corinne didn't answer that. She didn't need to. He looked at Naomi for another second, and something in his expression shifted. Not anger anymore, something closer to appraisal, like he was recalculating exactly what kind of problem she was. Your mother asked one question, he said. He opened the car door. You have no idea how many people never wanted it answered. Then he got in, and the door closed, and the car pulled away from the curb. None of them spoke until it had turned the corner and gone. The press conference happened on a Thursday, in a room that still smelled faintly of new carpet, and Naomi sat in the second row between Deja and Corinne, wearing a blouse Corinne had insisted on paying for and Naomi had insisted on choosing herself. What they announced took 11 minutes. A pattern of denied claims among home care workers, going back further than anyone at the company had wanted to admit. A new review board, independent of the insurance division, chaired by an outside labor attorney. Back payments, where they could still be traced, to families who'd been denied wrongly. One of those families is with me today. Corinne's hand tightened on the podium's edge. 14 years ago, a woman named Naomi Bellamy cared for my late husband with more skill and more decency than this company ever repaid her for. She asked a fair question about how we treated people like her. We answered by letting her go. She died 2 years ago from something that should have been treatable, covered by insurance that should have covered it. A hand went up before she'd finished. A woman near the front, press badge swinging on a lanyard, didn't wait to be called on. Mrs. Ashworth, her voice cut clean through the room. Are you admitting your company knowingly denied valid claims? The room went still in a way Naomi felt in her chest. Every camera seemed to lean forward at once. Corinne didn't look away, didn't reach for a prepared line. I'm admitting, she said, slowly, like she was choosing each word to hold weight for years, that people inside my company knew and chose not to tell me, because telling me would have cost them something. I'm not going to pretend that's a smaller sin than the denials themselves. It isn't. Another reporter, further back. Will anyone be held accountable, fired, prosecuted? Anyone found to have concealed this pattern will face consequences up to and including termination, Corinne said. That includes people whose names you'd recognize. The room stirred at that, a ripple of scribbled notes, a low murmur, and it was in that exact moment, while every head was still turned toward the podium, that the back doors opened. Julian walked in. He didn't approach the podium. He didn't speak. He stood at the rear of the room in the same considered suit from the sidewalk, hands loosely folded, and let every camera in the room swing around to find him. His face gave away nothing, not anger, not shame, just a flat, patient stillness, like a man taking inventory of exactly how much this was going to cost him. Corinne saw him. She didn't pause the conference, didn't acknowledge him by name. She simply held his gaze for 2 full seconds, long enough that everyone in the room understood something had passed between them, and then continued. Julian stayed another moment. Then he turned and left the way he'd come, and the doors closed behind him without a sound, and somehow that silence said more than anything he could have shouted. Afterward, in the quiet of a side room, Corinne sat across from Naomi and Deja, with her coat finally off, looking, for the first time since the bus, like someone allowed to be tired. He'll fight this, Corinne said. He showed up today instead of hiding, which tells me part of him already knows he's losing the argument that matters. Will he still come after us? Naomi asked. I won't promise you it's over, Corinne said. I'll only promise you won't be facing whatever comes next without someone who has something to lose alongside you. Deja looked down at her hands. She would have liked you, she said quietly. My mother. She didn't like people who apologized without changing anything. Corinne reached over and set, gently, on the table between them, a small silver pin, worn, the clasp slightly bent from years of use. This was hers, she said. I kept it in a drawer for 14 years, telling myself I'd return it eventually. I should have returned it a long time ago. 3 months later, Naomi was enrolled at the community college 2 evenings a week, working weekday afternoons at the fund's small outreach office. Deja had moved to a day shift with insurance that actually covered what it promised. One Thursday in February, an older woman came into the office in a home health uniform, clutching a folder of paperwork like it might be taken from her. "I was told to ask for Naomi Bellamy," the woman said. "That's me." The woman's eyes filled before she'd said anything else. "The fund covered my mother's treatment last month," she said. "The one they denied us twice before. I didn't think anybody remembered people like us." She reached out and took Naomi's hand in both of hers. "Because of your mother, mine is still here to see spring." Naomi didn't trust her voice for a moment. She just nodded and held the woman's hands back and let the office go quiet around them, the way it did sometimes in the middle of the afternoon. That evening, Naomi rode the same bus route home she used to take from the laundromat, not because she needed to anymore, but because some habits you keep on purpose. 2 stops before her own, a woman stepped up to the fare reader, dug through her bag with growing panic, and came up empty. The driver waited, patient in the way that wasn't quite patience. A couple of passengers glanced over, then away, the particular practiced indifference of people who'd rather not get involved. Naomi reached into her pocket and stepped forward. "I've got it," she said, and fed the coins into the reader before the woman could argue. "You didn't have to, I know." Naomi smiled. "It's not a big deal." She rode the rest of the way home with the window fogging faintly against the cold outside, and when she reached her stop and stepped down onto the sidewalk, her hand slid into her pocket out of habit, checking for her phone. She found a little loose change instead. Exact fare. Still sitting there. Never needed. She closed her hand around it and smiled at nothing in particular and walked the rest of the way home, where the kitchen light was already on and her sister was already there. And there was, for the first time in longer than she could remember, more than enough to go around. The lesson in Naomi's story is simple. Kindness doesn't ask who deserves it before it gives. She paid a stranger's fare with money she couldn't spare, never imagining that one small choice would change so many lives, not because she expected anything in return, but because compassion was simply part of who she was. Corinne Ashworth learned something too. Power can make it easy to overlook the people who carry the heaviest burdens. But one quiet act of grace forced her to look again, and this time she chose not to look away. In the end, justice wasn't about revenge. It was about telling the truth, accepting responsibility, restoring a forgotten name, and making sure the same wrong would never happen again. Renata Bellamy's story didn't end with silence. It became the reason other families were finally heard. Kindness doesn't always come back the way you expect. Sometimes it returns as hope, sometimes as healing, sometimes as a second chance for someone you'll never meet. But genuine kindness is never wasted, because every act of compassion leaves the world a little different than it found it. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories about kindness, justice, dignity, and the extraordinary impact of ordinary people who choose to do the right thing when no one is watching.